In 1975, we hated the mainframe. Centralized, run by a priesthood, billed by the hour. So we spent 50 years running from it. Mini computers, then a PC on every desk, then Linux on cheap servers, then the cloud. 50 years, all one direction, away from the center, away from the glass. Then we invented Kubernetes. Centralized, run by a priesthood, billed by the hour, again. The thing you adopted to escape lock-in is the lock-in. Nobody wants to say that out loud, so let's. Now, this isn't a Kubernetes is bad video. Kubernetes is an extraordinary piece of engineering. This is a question about a pattern. Why does computing keep swinging back to the center? And how did the tool we built for freedom end up rebuilding the exact cage we ran from? To answer that, you have to start with what it actually promised. Rewind to 2015. Google open sources the thing that ran Google, and the pitch was intoxicating. It made 3 promises. Promise 1, portability. Write your app once, describe what it needs in YAML, run it anywhere. AWS, GCP, Azure, your own metal, no more rewriting deploy scripts for every provider. Promise 2, no lock-in. That was the headline. Kubernetes was supposed to be the open layer that sat above the clouds, so no single vendor could ever own you again. Freedom from the hyperscaler. Promise 3, self-service. Developers stop filing tickets with ops. You push a manifest, the cluster reconciles reality to match it, and your app just exists. Infrastructure as a vending machine. Look at that. Declarative, honest. You say what you want, the system makes it true. In 2015, this felt like the end of operational suffering. Every one of those 3 promises is technically real, and every single one of them quietly inverted. So let's go collect the receipts. Promise 3 was self-service. Developers stopped needing ops. Here's what actually happened. We invented a whole new job title just to operate the self-service system. It's called platform engineering. And to be clear, these are some of the best engineers in the building. That's the point. Running a production cluster well takes a dedicated team that does nothing else. You didn't remove the priesthood between you and your infrastructure. You rehired it. Same glass wall. Now it ships Helm charts. Promise 1 was describe what you need. Remember that clean little manifest? That's the real cost of describing what you need. The description became its own software project. There are companies whose entire engineering culture is now the maintenance of YAML that produces YAML. And for a huge number of real applications, that does the exact same job. We'll come back to this one. Hold it in your head. Promise 2 was no lock-in. Instead, you got locked into complexity itself. Try it. Pick any senior engineer who runs a production cluster and ask them to trace, end-to-end, exactly what happens between kubectl apply and a running container. Not the happy path from a blog post, the real path. Through the API server, the admission webhooks, the scheduler, through the Kubernetes, the CNI plugin, and whatever your specific cluster bolted on top. Today, the ones who can trace the whole thing are rare. And not because they didn't study, because no single human was ever meant to hold this system in their head. The mainframe had the exact same property. A system that needs a priesthood by design isn't a coincidence. It's the architecture. And here's the most uncomfortable receipt of all. Kubernetes was built to run Google. It was designed for fleets of tens of thousands of machines. Out in the wild, the typical production cluster on a public cloud runs around 5 nodes. 5. Most organizations adopting this planet-scale orchestrator are running a workload that would fit comfortably on a couple of beefy servers, and those nodes sit mostly idle. According to Datadog's 2025 container study, most workloads running on Kubernetes use less than a quarter of the CPU they asked for, and most use less than half the memory they reserved. Reserved, but vacant, and you're paying the control plane by the hour to watch it sit there, so you adopted the tool built for 1,000 engineers and 10,000 machines, and you've got 8 engineers and 5 nodes sitting mostly idle. You're not operating Google's infrastructure. You're cosplaying it, and you're paying the control plane by the hour to do it. Okay, so the promise is inverted. The honest question is why? Why does this keep happening? Why did freedom collapse back into a center, both times? Here's the mechanism, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Kubernetes isn't really a way to run containers. It's a control plane. There's a central brain, the API server, the scheduler, a database called etcd that holds the one true state of the world, and it constantly reconciles reality to match a desired spec. Stop and look at that shape, a central system that holds the canonical state, that all work has to be submitted to. That decides what runs where. That is the exact architecture of a mainframe. The mainframe was one big computer that everything got submitted to. Kubernetes is one big control plane that everything gets submitted to. We didn't escape the topology, we containerized it. Now, why does the priesthood come with that shape every single time? This is the part people miss. When you centralize state and control, operational knowledge centralizes too. The cluster becomes one shared load-bearing system. A mistake doesn't break one app, it can break the platform every team depends on. So you can't let everyone touch it. You have to gate it behind a small group who understand it deeply. And that's not a culture problem you fix with better docs. It's a structural consequence of centralization. Centralize the state, and you will manufacture a priesthood. The mainframe didn't have operators because IBM was elitist. It had operators because a shared central system mathematically requires gatekeepers. Kubernetes inherited the architecture, so it inherited the priesthood. And the billing? Same logic. The control plane is always on. Most managed Kubernetes offerings charge you for that control plane by the hour, whether or not a single one of your apps is doing anything. EKS at 10 cents an hour. GKE standard at 10 cents an hour. And Azure's production standard tier? 10 cents an hour too. The free tier Azure offers is for dev clusters with no SLA. The moment you need uptime guarantees, you're back at a dime an hour, same as everyone else. A central system, metered by time, running whether you use it or not. Centralized, run by a priesthood, build by the hour. We didn't rebuild the mainframe's features, we rebuilt its physics. And remember that 5-line Docker compose file from the receipts? It doesn't have a control plane. It doesn't have etcd. It doesn't manufacture a priesthood. It just runs. You're still holding it in your head, right? Now I have to be honest with you here, because the lazy version of this video stops and just yells Kubernetes bad. That version is wrong, and the serious engineers watching already know it. There's a real point where every cost I just described turns into a bargain. Here's where Kubernetes isn't overkill, it's the correct answer. 1. Genuine scale. When you actually are running hundreds of services across hundreds or thousands of machines, you need a control plane. The alternative isn't simplicity, it's 1,000 bespoke shell scripts and a pager that never stops. At that size, the priesthood pays for itself many times over. 2. Real multi-tenancy. If you're a platform company running untrusted or isolated workloads for a lot of teams or customers, you need exactly what Kubernetes gives you. Namespaces, quotas, network policy, hard isolation, that's not bloat, that's the product. 3. Large, mature orgs. When you've got enough engineers that a dedicated platform team is already justified, standardizing every team onto one declarative substrate is a genuine force multiplier. Consistency across 200 engineers is worth real overhead. Notice the through line. Kubernetes earns its complexity when you've got the scale, the isolation needs, and the headcount it was designed for. Google had all three, and the mainframe back in 1975 was also the right call for the handful of organizations that genuinely had mainframe scale problems. The tragedy was never the mainframe. The tragedy was everyone else renting one because it looked serious. That's the line you don't want to be on. So if you're not Google, what should you reach for? Not nothing. The answer is matching the tool to the actual scale. Here's the ladder. Rung 1, one app, modest traffic. A single virtual machine. Yes, really. One box, a reverse proxy, your app behind it. A surprising number of profitable companies run their whole production on one well-cared-for server. It's boring, it's also bulletproof, and you can hold the entire system in your head. Rung 2, a few services that have to run together. Docker Compose. That 8-line file I showed you earlier wasn't a joke. It's a legitimate production pattern for small teams. One file, the whole stack, on one machine. The thing you'd have written 400 lines of YAML for. Rung 3, you've outgrown one box, and you want real scheduling without the cathedral. Nomad. It's an orchestrator that does the core job, scheduling workloads across machines with a fraction of the operational surface. Most teams never need more than this. Rung 4, you want to ship and never think about infrastructure at all. A managed PaaS. Fly.io, Render, Railway, Google App Engine. You hand them a container or a repo, they run it. You're paying someone else to be the priesthood, so your team doesn't have to become one. And rung 5 is Kubernetes, when the counterexample I just gave you is genuinely you. The point isn't that the top of the ladder is bad, it's that you don't start at the top. You climb to it only when the lower rungs actually break. So here's the move. Look at your cluster, count your nodes, count your engineers, look at your CPU graph, then ask the only question that matters. Which rung is my actual problem on? Most of you already know the answer. You just needed permission to say it. And look, most of us didn't choose this with clear eyes. We adopted Kubernetes because it was on every job posting, because not using it felt like admitting we weren't real engineers. The complexity wasn't a decision. It was a status symbol we were afraid to get caught without. But here's the reframe the priesthood will never sell you. Choosing the simple thing, the single VM, the one compose file, the boring server, that's not the junior move. It's the senior one. Simplicity isn't a limitation you settle for. Simplicity is an architecture decision you make on purpose, and then defend. The engineer who can run a profitable product on one machine they fully understand is operating at a higher level than the one drowning in a cluster nobody can explain. We spent 50 years escaping the mainframe. And the way to actually stay free isn't a better orchestrator. It's the discipline to not rebuild the cage every time the industry tells you the cage is what serious people use. If this clicked, you've probably already felt the same instinct somewhere else. The engineers quietly questioning their clusters and the engineers quietly deleting their microservices are the same people, chasing the same thing, simplicity they can hold in their head. I followed exactly where that instinct leads in another breakdown on the channel. Senior engineers are quietly deleting their microservices in 2026. Watch that one next. It's the other half of this argument.